Shalom Aleichem and welcome everyone as we are preparing for Shabbat, Parshat Tetzaveh. This week's Parasha starts off and primarily discusses the clothing that the Kohanim would be wearing whilst doing the service in the Beit HaMikdash. The Pasuk says, "V'asita v'gdei kodesh lechavod ultifaret." They should make the Bigdei Kodesh, the holy garments, for glory and for splendor. So I think it wise today to talk a little bit about clothing and how clothing is looked at in Judaism. The first thing is, a lot of people go with the first impression. You see somebody, you see the way he's dressed, it creates a first impression, and you now create in your mind an idea about the person based on the way the person is dressed. That's why they say you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. So you go to an interview, you dress up right, you dress up good, you make sure everything is right, because you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. But if we only looked at somebody's clothing, would we really have a good understanding of who this person is? Can we really say that this person is somebody based on the way he's dressed? Harav Shlomo Levenstein shared over a true story that happened a long time ago with the Ibn Ezra. The Ibn Ezra was a famous scholar who wrote commentary that we have till today. And he, however, was very poor. He was so poor that he once said if he were to sell candles, then the sun would never set. And if he was to sell tachrichim, the clothing that you put dead people in, people would stop to die. Basically, his mazal and parnasah was very weak. And that's the way he lived his life. He realized that. And he played his part. He didn't have fancy clothing. And one Erev Shabbat, he found himself in a small, distant town, far away from his home. And he went to the shul and he approached the wealthy people of the shul to see if they can give him a meal, a place to sleep. And all the rich people tried to avoid him. Finally, in the end, one of the rich people said, okay, you can come. But he told him, you can't sit on the main table. You're too poor looking, you're gonna mess up everything, you gotta sit on the side. And they gave him a corner and a little table, and they gave him his food there, and he sat and he ate like a poor person. Motzei Shabbat, the Ibn Ezra came to this Gevir, this rich man. He said, I want to thank you for your hospitality. And while I was here, I realized you have a daughter that you're looking for a shidduch. I'll tell you, I have a person who I think would be perfect for your family. And the guy's like, I don't need your help, I'm fine. He says, no, I'm telling you, I have. What you have to lose, let him come and check. The rich man said, listen, you know what, fine, it's very hard to get a good shidduch. We'll try it. You can send the boy over, we'll take a look at him. The Ibn Ezra knew of a certain guy in that city that dressed very well, looked very handsome, but chokhmah, wisdom, he did not have at all. So he told this guy, I want you to go to this rich man and present yourself, but don't talk too much. I'm going to tell him that you don't like to talk in public. They're going to want to test your wisdom to see if you're smart. And I'm going to be next to you. Whenever they send, I'll write the answer and send it back. So Ibn Ezra came back to this rich man and says, listen, I found this guy, he's a really nice guy. He just doesn't like talking in public. I know you guys are going to want to test him to see what does he know, what he doesn't know. Whatever you want, he says he'll sit in another room, you give him the questions, and he'll send you back the answer. So the rich man invited all the big rabbanim in his city to come to meet this young guy. Maseh, he looked beautiful, very handsome, very well dressed. He looked very noble. And the Rabbanim said, okay, we're going to start testing him. And so, as the Ibn Ezra was there as the Shadchan, he said, okay, you want to test him? Put him in the other room. Whatever question you want, the rabbi should write it down, and he'll give you back his answer. And so it was, the rabbis wrote down the question, the Ibn Ezra took the question to this man, into the other room. This guy doesn't know the answer. Meanwhile, the Ibn Ezra wrote the answer and sends it back to the Rabbanim. The rabbis look at it and say, wow, this guy's not only handsome, well-dressed, rich, he's so smart. What a catch. What a catch. They tell the rich man, you got to do it. The rich man sees this. He says, listen, I can't give this up. I had to right away make this shidduch happen. And so he gets his daughter married to this guy. The Ibn Ezra, wedding's over. He continues on his journey. Now this guy has to fend for himself. And obviously he knew nothing. And the father-in-law, the rich man, realized this man knows nothing. And he got really upset. He tracked down the Ibn Ezra and said, how could you do this to me? How could you trick me? Make this shidduch. The guy doesn't know nothing. You wrote the answers. How could you do this? And Ibn Ezra said, listen, I noticed that you like externalism. You like nice clothes, the way people behave, the way people look. So I brought you nice clothes. You like nice clothes. I brought you nice clothes. The man said, what am I supposed to do? He married my daughter. How could you do this? Ibn Ezra said, listen, don't worry. I'll tutor him myself. Of course, you pay me. I don't know if he said that part. But I assume that he went and he tutored this young man. And the young man became one of the scholars of the city. So we see that externalism, if you just looked at externalism, it's not good. You have to look on the inside of a person too. So what does this mean when the parasha is talking over and over again about making this V'asiti Bigdei Kodesh? We'll move to the Vilna Gaon's pshat. The Vilna Gaon, he says that in Tanakh, anywhere in Torah it talks about clothing, what it's really talking about is midot. A person's character traits are called his clothing. For example, in Tanakh it says that Chana, the mother of the prophet Shmuel Hanavi, when she brought her young son at age 2 to Eli, the Kohen Gadol, it says his mother made him a small garment. And Hazal tell us, the Midrash tells us that as he grew, the garment grew with him. How does the garment grow with him? And so the way the Vilna Gaon learns this is that the midot that she taught him as he grew, his midot that his mother taught him continued to grow with him. And that's what it means. His clothing was his midot. The Gemara says, in Gemara Pesachim says about a Torah scholar, your sudar, your cloak, is like that of a Torah scholar. How does that mean that someone's cloak is like a Torah scholar? It means that he acts, his midot is like a Talmid Chacham. The Vilna Gaon brings another proof. The Queen Esther, it says she's going to talk to King Achashverosh, and she dressed in royal garments. She's the queen. Of course she's dressing in royal garments. So what does it mean she's dressing in royal garments? So the Vilna Gaon says again, it means that she put on better midot. She was fixing her character traits. And so when the Torah is telling us, V'asiti b'dei kodesh, the Chavol Tifaret is telling us that the Kohanim have to work on their character traits. In fact, the Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin that Hashem grabbed Yeravam by his clothing and told him to do teshuvah. Yeravam, who went against Shlomo HaMelech, Hashem grabbed him by the clothing. What do you mean by his clothing? It means by his midot. Hashem was telling him, you got to change your midot. If you change your midot, you'll be able to do teshuvah, and you're able to go into Gan Eden. And so midot, the Vilna Gaon again says over and over again, it means begadim. That's why it tells us in Masechta Shabbat that the clothing you wear on Shabbat should be different. Yes, the basic level is wearing a different suit, different shirt, different shoes. But on a higher level, this also means a person's character traits on Shabbat should be more holy than it is the rest of the week. That's why we also have a Gemara Masechta Shabbat that tells us a Talmid Chacham who goes out with stained clothing deserves death. If he has dirt on his clothing, he deserves death. What does this mean? The Vilna Gaon explains, it means if a Talmid Chacham goes out with bad midot, they're going to say, this is what the Torah teaches a person, Chas v'Shalom. And it's going to make a big Hilul Hashem. Therefore, a person has to make sure to always have bigdei lavan, always have white garments, right? As we have the famous midrash that tells us, and Rashi says it with a parable. It says, "Let your garments always be white. You should always have bigdei lavan, because you don't know when the party is going to be. So you got to make sure that when you go into Olam Haba, your clothing is white." The Talmid Chacham has to always make sure that his clothing is white. The Hafetz Chaim once saw his son Reb Leib do something, and he told Reb Leib, "A Talmid Chacham like you should not be doing something like this. It's going to cause a Hilul Hashem." And his son Reb Leib told the Hafetz Chaim, he said, "Father, but I'm not a Talmid Chacham. I'm stam a guy. It's not a regular guy. I'm a regular Jew." And the Chafetz Chaim told him, "For Hilul Hashem, you're enough of a Talmid Chacham." Rav Pam would say even further. He says today and nowadays, any Jew who walks with a yarmulke on his head, with a kippah on his head, and especially if he has a beard, to the world he's a Talmid Chacham. And therefore, he has to be very careful that his midot are always white. Is that you have to always be on the best and the best. But the psukim, the words of the psukim cannot go out of its simple explanation. So you have to understand, so we explained already that outside clothing, you cannot only look at the outside. At the same point, that the clothing could also mean midot. But what does it mean to make them clothing? And so I saw in the Peninim al Torah, he writes a very interesting piece here. He writes that one of the reasons that we make Kohanim wear these special clothing is for the Kohen and for the people to understand and believe the Kohen's position. Right? A certain positions require certain uniforms. Right? And then that uniform gives a sort of
constant reminder.
A constant reminder to both the Kohen and to the people. When the people would see that the Kohen dressed in the special garments, they would now believe the Kohen to have the power to bring kapara, to bring the korbanot, to do the other things that they're supposed to do, right? Same in the Havdil, same way you have a police uniform, you have other uniforms. They give a certain authority to the person, and it gives a certain belief to the person as well, who's acting that way, and at the same time, the people who look at it. So, once there was a young boy. He came into shul wearing like this orange t-shirt with all sorts of funny words on it. And he was wearing, it wasn't really very respectful to the shul. So he comes inside, and one of the rabbis tells him, "Listen, maybe you can change." He says, what's the problem? I'm wearing clothing, it's fine. The rabbi said, "Would we cover a Sefer Torah with this t-shirt? Would you feel comfortable making the cover for the Sefer Torah with this t-shirt?" He says, "No, Sefer Torah is a Sefer Torah." So he says to him, "And what are you?" Every Jew can embody a Sefer Torah. We're living, breathing Sefer Torah. We're following Hashem's word. So we have to understand who we are, what we are, and how clothing pays respect to that as well. So that's an idea about clothing and how to look at it from all the different angles. Let's move on to another lesson on this week's parasha. In the next pasuk in the Torah, it tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu is to collect va'atat tedaber al kol chachmei leiv asher me'leitiv ruach chochmah. You should speak to all the smart people that I filled with wisdom. Kol chachmei leiv, all of them. Asher me'leitiv ruach chochmah, that I filled with wisdom. That's talking about one person. So it goes from talking to all the wise people than to talking to one wise person. The Hatam Sofer explains as follows. Hashem said to Moshe, he's to speak to all of them, but to each one separately. To each one according to his unique wisdom. Hashem imbued every single wise person with his own potential for greatness. And Moshe Rabbeinu's job was to inspire him to use that chokhmah v'akadosh baruch hu. That means that each, et kol chachmei leiv, all of them are smart. Hashem eleitiv ruach chokhmah. Hashem said, I filled them up with chokhmah. Now to take out that chokhmah, to bring it out, that was Moshe Rabbeinu's job. Just as a seed is planted into a soil and it has to break through, you have to plow, sow, and water and weed, and it will grow. Same thing is with a person's potential. Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem was telling him that it's his job to take it out of all the Chachmei Lev, their Chokhmah, so it can be recognized and can be used. Based on this, we understand that especially teachers, or educators, Rabbanim, Moras, they're dealing with people and especially with children. One of their main goals is to tell each child he has potential and work on that child's unique talents and abilities to bring them out. Right? Meaning, we have to find where they're good at, and we have to try to make that grow. And a lot of times, it really depends on the teacher or the Mora, how much self-confidence they have. If the teacher believes in themselves and what they're doing, then they're able to give over self-confidence to the students. And the students will see that and take that and work with that. But if the teacher themselves feel like they don't have enough confidence, then how could they give that confidence to the children? It's important that the teachers have the confidence and then they pass it on to the children. The children now take that and be able to bring out their unique abilities and talents. It's also important to educators to, at times, they might have to give incentives, which means is sometimes a student has a certain talent or knowledge or wisdom, and you want to get them to work on it, but they may, they're not interested or lazy, or they feel they're not so good at it. So teachers now job to provide an incentive. Someone plays piano and the kid's good at it, but he's lazy, he doesn't want to do it, or feels he made a mistake. So you give them you want a toy, you want an ice cream, you want something like that, and you provide the incentive for them to continue to grow. It's important that we understand this part of Hashem Eleitiv Ruach Chokhmah, that Hashem put into all wise people wisdom, and it's our job, just as Moshe Rabbeinu's job was to take out their wisdom and make it actual. It is our job as teachers, as educators, as Rabbanim, Moras, especially parents, that we provide for our children, and the people around us, a way to take out their potential and bring it out to the world so everyone can recognize it. Rav Beryl Wine, Shlita, was once asked how he was able to achieve so much with all his tapes, CDs, books, papers, lecturing on Jewish history and all types of topics. He was asked how he was able to reach so much. And Rav Pesach Krohn records the story that Rav Beryl Wine would say over. Rabbi Krohn records as follows. It was 1946, and Harav Yitzchak Halevi Herzog, the chief rabbi of Eretz Yisrael, was visiting Chicago. The building was packed, standing, room only, and the Rav gave a shiur. And Rav Herzog gave a shiur, and after the shiur, he turned to all the yeshiva students and said to them as follows: I was just in Rome, and I met there the Pope, and I had with me a list of 10,000 boys and girls whose parents placed them in Catholic institutions at the start of the war. And I wanted to get the children back and bring them to Eretz Yisrael and to give them a proper Torah education. And the Pope said he cannot give them back to me. He said now that they were baptized and they're growing up in the church, I cannot send them back. All of these children were baptized. They're now Christian. I cannot send them back. And Rav Herzog said, I cried and I cried, but he wouldn't listen. As Rav Herzog was telling the story over, he was crying. And he put his head on the stender and he was crying. And everyone in the whole place was quiet. They don't know what to say. Then the Rav Herzog, picked up his head with tears down his cheeks. He looked at all of us and said, I cannot do anything for 10,000 children. But what are you going to do for the children of Klal Yisrael? It's your responsibility, pointing to everyone in the room, to help raise the future of our people. What are you prepared to do about it? Are you listening? Will you remember what I'm asking of you? And when Rav Herzog was finished, we all lined up to shake his hand. And Rav Wein said, when he took my hand, he looked straight in my eye and said, are you going to forget what I said? Will you remember what I said? What are you going to do for the children of Klal Yisrael? And Rav Wein said, every time I'm tired, every time I want to stop, every time I want to put down my pen, every time I want to just not do anything, these words come flooding into my head. What am I doing for the children of Klal Yisrael? It is in our hands to help the children, to help Klal Yisrael. And our job is to bring out the potential that they have. So many of our brothers and sisters were taken away from us, whether physically, spiritually, emotionally. It is our job to raise the next generation in the right path and to bring them closer to Torah and Mitzvot. To end off with our last lesson in this week's parasha, we're taught about the Avnei Shoham, that they would write the 6 names on one side and 6 names on the other Avnei Shoham, and then they would put it on the shoulders of the Kohen Gadol that would wear it. The Avnei Shoham on 2 sides of the ephod, on the ketafav, on the shoulders. The Abarbanel learns an amazing lesson on that and that symbolism of putting it on the shoulders. He says that this symbolizes Aharon's constant awareness of Klal Yisrael's problems. Aaron HaKohen, he carried the burden of the Jewish people on his shoulders at all times. He put all of the Jewish people on his shoulders. The Kohen Gadol, as the leader of Klal Yisrael, the spiritual of Klal Yisrael, he always has to have on him all of the troubles of Klal Yisrael. That's what it means to be a true leader in Judaism. I want to share a few stories that go with this. There's a story here I saw, brought down by Mordechai Eliyahu, that one day he was running a little late, and a woman was trying to stop him to talk to him, and his Gaiboyim were pretty much saying, we don't have time, you can't, but he says, and she said, it's a matter of life and death. So he said, you know what, let me talk to her. And he brought her in, and he was talking to her. And at the end of the conversation, he was saying, if it doesn't work, come back tomorrow. So his Gabayim asked him after she left, was it really a matter of life and death? And Mordechai said, probably not. He says, what was the whole thing about? He says, she came to me because her cat, she has a cat at home, and the cat's not eating. And she's very worried about the cat, so she wanted to know what she can do. So I said, Rabbi, this you're wasting your time with, we have so many important things to do. And he said, what are you talking about? He says, to her, that is life and death. That's her important. That's her life. Her cat. And so it's my job to help her. What she needs. I remember hearing Rabbi Yisrael Belsky say, one morning his children found him nursing a cat. He had a baby bottle and he was giving milk to the cat. What happened? He was walking outside and there was a cat that looked injured. So he brought it home, fixed him up, and was giving him milk to drink. You know, everything in the world would fall on their shoulders. They took responsibility for it all. When Hamav Ovadia, Harav HaGaon Chacham Ovadia Yosef, when he was a young man growing up, he once went around from town to town giving speeches about sending children to the proper schools, Chinuch Atzmai schools, real religious schools, not the government-sponsored schools. And he once met a rabbi from the Aguda, and the rabbi asked him, which organization you work for? I said, I'm not working for any organization. So how are you paying for everything? I'm paying from my own pocket. Why are you doing it? So why I'm doing it. The Jewish people need it. They need to know where to send their kids. People don't know. They're sending to the wrong places. Person has to get up and do it. And the story goes that once a principal came to Chacham Ovadia and told him, we have two good boys in the school, and the father wants to take them out and put them in a different school that's not so good, and we don't want to lose them. Chacham Ovadia said, let's go right now to them. He says, but I drive a jalopy. It's not honorable for the rabbi to go in. He says, I don't care. We're going to that person's house. He says, they get to that house, and everyone's looking who's coming out of this broken down car. And Chacham Ovadia gets out and he knocks on the door of the house. The father opens up and he's like in a t-shirt. He sees Chacham Ovadia. He closes the door. He quickly gets dressed. He comes back in. Chacham Ovadia starts to talk to him and telling him the importance of sending his kids to a proper yeshiva. And right then the man said, you know what, I'm not taking them out. I'm going to leave them inside. And the story after story like this, that these rabbis would get involved. They didn't have to get involved. They didn't have to take this upon themselves. They have plenty what to do on their own time. But they realize that as leaders, all of Klal Yisrael is on their shoulders. And as such, they have to put these people on them and do what needs to get done for them. So B'ezrat Hashem, I think we have three very, very important lessons. A, what it means to be wearing clothing. The importance not to judge someone really just on their first looks, but to understand the mitzvot is the most important part, but also to understand the way we dress represents who we are, and represents who we are to other people. The lesson of being able to grow someone's potential, and the third lesson of being that as leaders, and we all are leaders in some sense, because at home we're either a father, a mother, a parent. With our siblings, we may be the one who influences them. Amongst others, everyone works in some role as a leader, and as a leader that means we put the responsibility and we put the problems of everyone on our shoulders and try to help them out. And if we do this, Hashem should bless us, that we should see much happiness, and we should be blessed with everything that we need. And with this, I would love to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom.